Now, India is, taking their stance very clear already by the Foreign Minister Jaishankar, Indian Prime Minister Modi,
he's amazing,
and for even the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. But Europe's voice is all very very important in terms of human rights, democracy, and this inclusion.
Yes.
So I am going through on economic issues because being an economist. So if when I met you on September, you talked that you met few years back with Yunus. So he advocated his microcredit policy that it is reducing. He will send the property in the museum. Always advocated and so-called 3-0. This is very very what it calls. It's the idea of many people, many experts said it's the idea of utopia. So how do you evaluate his his so-called microcredit policy for reducing poverty and inequality around the world?
Yes, no, this is a very interesting question because you rightly pointed to this that about 15 years ago, the European Union was also experimenting with microfinance. And this was after the great financial crisis, when people saw the big banking system failing, and a lot of the large commercial banks also had to be bailed out because of the situation of the bankruptcy in the aftermath of the 2008 crash, which started in the United States, but also engulfed many countries, including the European ones. And the European financial crisis lasted very long. And that was also the time when I had a meeting with Mr. Yunus, I assume in Vienna, when there was a big congress of microfinance. And I think maybe at that time there was a kind of excessive expectation, some idealism, that the big banks are big banks are too big to fail. They get bailed out. They are, on the other hand, destined to move away from the everyday reality of the population. And indeed, there was a strong campaign in favor of microfinance, which I think can be useful in certain conditions. At the same time, to assume that microfinance in general is a good way to save the population from poverty, it's obviously false, right? Microfinance can help if, for example, there are certain...
Only hand to mouth, you can say?
No, but I think is that if people have experience and skills, and they would like to turn themselves into entrepreneurs.
No, most of them are illiterate women. They have to repay their, this amount of money from the next week. So that's what kind of initiative you have? You can earn money from within the week, and you have to repay next week.
Yes,
and people are falling trapped. The one journalist from Denmark, Dan Heyman, he made a video documentary. It calls microcredit debt trap.
Exactly. Yes, people can easily fall into a debt trap. In the Western world, the so-called payday loan, right? Sometimes people are so poor that their wages are not sufficient until the end of the month, and they borrow somewhere. And at a condition with a credit with an interest rate which is too much, and then people fall into a situation when they can refinance the debt with further borrowing, and that's a very clear case of a debt trap, and people can lose their wealth. So that's why in Europe this was not the direction, right? So it's where Europeans use microfinance, it's not for the most destitute part of the population. Because obviously for the poorer people, you need first of all social security, you need aid, you need some kind of financial support to have housing, to have health service, and start a decent life, but not loans. The loans can function if somebody can become an entrepreneur, and in order to have the first steps to establish an enterprise with mentoring, with coaching, additional support, you provide some kind of concessional loan scheme. This is a viable scheme, but to assume that against large-scale poverty, microfinance would need to be the solution. I'm not really doubtful, but I think I'm categorically negative on this.